Curry Sexton is talking with me. So the third quarter has been a problem for K-State throughout much of the season, and in particular the losing streak. The Wildcats have been outscored 35-0 now in the third quarter over the last four games. I asked Chris Kleiman this question, and we've asked it a couple of different ways really over the last few weeks. And the only answer he was really giving is execution. It's execution. We have to execute this and this and this better. To me, that's a fairly disappointing answer because it just seems too much in common with all of these different performances where there has to be something going on with adjustments being made. What to you is the biggest issue with what's happening in the third quarter?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we've found, I think our game plans have generally been pretty solid for the first half. I mean, we're coming out, and we've seen it almost all year long, with the exception of the the Iowa State game and maybe the West Virginia game. But you've seen that we've been competitive in the first half and in the first three quarters of almost every football game. And I think that's a testament to our staff and our players being prepared. But you're right, we come out in the second half and we come out flat. The offense starts scuffling. We're producing a lot of 3-and-out, or we are, having a lot of 3-and-outs, which in turn forces the defense to just constantly be on the football field. And so I don't think it's too much of a problem with our defense necessarily. I think our offensive adjustments at halftime or our reaction to the adjustments made by opposing defenses has been insufficient, and that has caused a lot of issues throughout the football team. Saturday I thought our defense played extremely well in the first half, and even through part of the third quarter. I mean, the sacks, the tackles for losses, all of those things, they illustrate that. But our defense, just in that fourth quarter, you could see that they were gassed. They had nothing left, and that was because of the offense's inability to move the football, to get first down, and to keep the clock churning. So yeah, I've been disappointed with our second half adjustments. I think that's that has been probably the biggest, in my mind, the biggest factor for a weak second half performances.
What kinds of things are typically happening there? When we say halftime adjustments, that's one of those things I feel like fans, we in the media say all the time, but we don't know specifically really what it is that happens there at halftime. What is it that's going on in the locker room with an offensive coordinator, with the head coach, et cetera, when they are making quote-unquote halftime adjustments?
Well, so first off, what we traditionally did was we first come in and the offense. I mean, so the offense, the defense, and the special teams during the course of halftime will meet as units, and those sessions are oftentimes pretty brief. But the offensive coordinator will generally try to correct some issues. If you've had issues running certain schemes, or if you've had issues making certain blocks, reads, whatever it might be, those issues will be corrected from the top down for the offense as a whole. And then after that, after you correct the issues that expose themselves in the first half, then you begin to consider changes that need to be made going forward. Because I think the biggest problem that faces offense and offensive coordinators is that they have a good first half and they just assume that they can sit on that game plan. They can rest on that first half game plan and not predict changes that are made, or not flow with the changes that are made by the opposing defense. And so, the second portion of that collective offensive meeting needs to be, addressing changes that the defense is sure to make based on tendencies that you've seen from them, or just generally based on successes that you've had against them. And so then you have to be prepared to alter your game plan, to counter the changes that they've made. And then, the position groups then break down, and, the individual position group coaches should be going over some of those same changes that must be made, even if you've had a productive first half, because any good football coach isn't going to just sit there and continue to take a beating. So those are the biggest issues in my mind. It doesn't appear that we're trying to counter changes that are being made. And then I think we just have a tendency to come out flat. And just like anything in sports or in life, where things go wrong a number of times, you start to feel a pattern developing. Then it starts to become a mental thing. Maybe there's something the coaching staff can do to emphasize the importance of starting out the third quarter strong, just as you emphasize the start of a football game. We had similar issues at one time when I was at K-State, and as ridiculous as it was, we had during practice, during the course of the week, after the kind of the mid-practice break that we customarily had, Coach Snyder used to make us go down to the ramp and run out, run down the field as if you were entering the field, before a game. And we all thought that was crazy, but it was just a way for him to emphasize and make us emphasize how important the start of that third quarter was. And so I don't know if there's something the staff can do to get the team to understand that, hey, you got to stay ready at halftime, and we got to come out prepared for the second half. But I think there are some changes that could be made.
I like that. Curry Sexton talking with us. That's pretty fascinating, actually. Chris Kleiman said he felt like Will Howard took some steps, and he seemed to heap some level of praise on him for the game. The stat line still obviously was not very pretty. What did you see from Will? Do you perceive that as a step forward against Baylor?
I do. I think he looked more confident. He looked more comfortable. Now, granted, that defense is not as strong as the one that they saw at Iowa State the week before. But I do think that Will looked to be he looked to be not so gun shy like he had the week before. So I'd chalk that up as a win. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think a lot of our struggles unfortunately fall on the receiving group. And I know we've had a lot of injuries and transfers from that group, but those are generally guys that just aren't getting open. And I don't, without really analyzing it in a lot more detail, I don't know if it's schematic. I'm guessing it's probably not, entirely schematic, but we're not getting guys on the perimeter who can consistently get open. And so as a young quarterback, that can cause a guy to get a little bit skittish and a guy to be pretty unsure. And I think we've seen that. And so I hope that, again, just like last week, I hope that we can finish out the season on a good note for Will's sake, because he's a kid with some promise. And if you shake a guy's confidence real bad in his first season, that can have a lasting impact. And I just hope that he can, find some things to build off of.
Well, I'm going to ask you this because this was our opening discussion today. Bowl games have started to come into view a bit here. It sounds like, just in listening to Gene Taylor talk on Monday, that even if K-State loses, they probably will still be in one of the Big 12 bowl slots, depending on how things go. My theory here is, well, one, just me personally, it feels like the last 6 weeks have been pretty exhausting, and I just have a hard time being excited about playing a bowl game if you're going to be sub 500, maybe against a group of 5 team. You don't get the fanfare of, hey, hang out for a week and get to do all these fun things as a team. You're just going in and out basically this year to play the game. And my theory would be that for a lot of these players, like this season has just been so exhausting for them that it would be tough to get up or excited for a bowl game. How would you take that? How do you guess that the players would handle that and will handle that when K-State comes to it?
Yeah, I think there's some serious concerns there. You're right. This has been an incredibly difficult year. Every day has been a different challenge for these players and these coaches, and so I can imagine that a lot of these guys, especially after the last several weeks of play, that they're ready for this season to be done. They're ready to get home, take a break, recover mentally and physically. And so, yeah, if I was in the player's shoes, I would be hesitant to commit to playing in a bowl game that isn't going to have that bowl game feel. It'll be another week. They'll probably be on a lockdown in another city. There won't be anything really glamorous about it. But from the coach's perspective, or from the perspective of the program as a whole, I think there's a ton of benefits that a bowl game can have. I think that we've already seen a huge issue with transfers, and I think if you allow guys, you play this Saturday the 5th, and then if your season's over, the guys aren't coming back probably until after. Whenever the second semester starts, so whenever that week after Martin Luther King Day, that's a heck of a long break. That's 6 weeks for guys to go home, to reassess, to reevaluate their standing as a Kansas State football player. And as we've seen, guys have already left, probably in large part because of COVID. You allow these kids to go back home and spend 6 weeks with their family, there's a strong chance that a lot more of them are going to think, I don't want to be that far away from my family again, especially during a global pandemic. And I can't blame them. But if you're trying to keep the program intact and trying to keep guys around, 6 weeks off it could be detrimental, and that's not even considering the fact that that's 6 weeks away from conditioning, development, everything else. I mean, the bowl prep is so vital to the development of young players and even upperclassmen, especially considering that everybody can come back next year if they choose and if the program allows them. So I think from the program's perspective, it's a must. It's a no-brainer. Go to the bowl game, get that extra development. From the player's perspective, yeah, I don't think I'd be in favor of that if I was an underclassman who'd just been through a crazy season and a season with just unexpected event after unexpected event.
Curry Sexton talking with me. Before I let you go, speaking of players' perspective, what was it like playing against Texas every single year? I'm curious here because I remember you saying it was Kansas, right, that they talked a lot for a team that wasn't very good. Was Texas a team that was chirpy at all? They get the reputation of being like this country club, kind of soft. What was it like playing against Texas throughout your career?
Yeah, I'd characterize them as kind of a country club team. I mean, you always had a little bit of fear, of natural fear, given that, so for instance, I think it was 2011 or 2013, it was 2011. We go down there to play them midway through the season. We're ranked pretty high, having a pretty good year. You go out on the field for pregame, for the warm-ups that occur before warm-ups, so when guys are just out there doing their own thing. And you look at our side, and you got a bunch of people like me, not guys that look like physical specimens or weight room warriors. You look across the field, and it looks like a bunch of dudes who are cut out to play in the NFL. And so instantly you're thinking, man, I don't know if we can hang with these guys. And then you get on the field, and you punch them in the mouth a couple times, and more so than maybe other teams, they had a tendency to give up a little bit. And I think that was just the nature of the program, the nature of the players that they had on their team. These were kids who had always been the best. They'd always been told they were the best, and then they get beat up by a bunch of a bunch of misfits, so to speak. And so they didn't chirp a lot. They weren't like KU in that respect. I mean, they obviously had guys who did, just like every team. But yeah, they were disappointing from the standpoint of you expected more from a bunch of guys like Malcolm Brown, who's still in the NFL, surprisingly, plays for the Rams, but he was like all world coming out of high school. The Acho brothers, so many guys. You go down the list. I mean, it goes on and on. But they just never. They didn't appear to be guys who were interested in playing. And the minute things got tough, they often shut down.